This is Dave Monk, Prairie Monk, WEFT, Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board.
And it's Folk and Roots time in the banner. And I want to encourage them. It's difficult for the banner to, if you want a national level group of people to come in and have 1,000 seats, we don't have that sort of facility there. So sometimes the music events that start in Urbana end up in Champaign. But it's a fun activity, and Folk and Roots promises to stay in Urbana, but they would like to have a venue where you could have some pretty serious population of people indoors. It's not summer anymore, and so David has been very much a part of that, and he helps run a harmonica workshop. So I'm going to get David to say something about the Folk and Roots Festival, since he knows more about it, and perhaps play a little harmonica.
Sure, give people a 1-minute summary of the 2-hour workshop. Yeah, Folk and Roots has been going on for 6 years now. 6 years ago, they got started, and they did it earlier in the year when they could have, for the first couple of years, they had most of their events outside, and then realized there was too much competition with other stuff going on around, and so they moved it later in the year to November so that they could move inside, and they take over the Iron Post and several other places. This year, it was largely based out of what most of us remember as Zoomers. Now it's called the Landmark Hotel. And so we took over the entire first floor of the place and lots of the balcony areas on the other side. And it was great fun. And yes, every year that they've done it, I'm not quite sure what possessed me. I'm a really avid amateur harmonica player. And the first year when I heard that they were starting up, I said, hey, you know what would be really fun? If I got to sit there for an hour or two and just teach people to play harmonica. And you know what would be even better? If you guys put up the money to buy a bunch of harmonicas. And so starting the first year, they put up about money for like 10 harmonicas, and it increased up to 12 and 15. And this year we gave away 20 harmonicas to people. And we had about...
I did one too.
Yes, that's right. You joined us last year, so you're one of the people. You're one of the veterans or the alums of this 2-hour class, and it's amazing. I tell people I'm really passionate about the instrument because it is so blastedly simple. There are no wrong notes on it. Whatever the notes are that are appropriate to the key of the harmonica, that's all you've got there. And there's one way that you could make notes that don't sound spectacular, so I'm going to avoid those. But no, this is what it basically sounds like. A harmonica goes... Oh my gosh, and you're already playing harmony with yourself. How simple is that? And you don't have any training whatsoever. That's my understanding of how in the 1800s this instrument was invented, and even Abraham Lincoln, I'm told, had a harmonica. And at some point, somebody said, well, wait a second, all of those chords that people are playing are really individual notes. If I wanted to, I could actually play the melody. And if you want to play a simple folk kids type melody, you could go something like... little jazzy version of it there. There you go. Itsy Bitsy Spider, trivially simple. It's right built into this harmonica. And then somebody else said later, well, okay, great, that's fine. You're playing the notes in the key of the harmonica that you're playing there. That song, for people who care, was in the key of A, and it's on an A harmonica. And somebody said, but wait, there's this note E that's on that harmonica. Wow, what if I started playing using that note and based my music around that note instead of the folky A that's on the harmonica? And so this is what they came up with. And suddenly you've turned this from a folk instrument into a blues instrument, and you can just keep going on from there. And that one simple little instrument that doesn't have any wrong notes on it can play bunches and bunches of really cool stuff. And that's a 2-minute summary of what I got to do for 2 hours yesterday.
And it's very interesting. You can put your harmonica in your pocket and go places and join in with music. And so it's a very communal piece of equipment.
Yes, we can be the bane of the music community because we can sneak up on you. Like you say, we can have nothing in our hands, nothing strapped to our backs. We're just standing there. Oh, you think this is just somebody here to listen to us. And all of a sudden, somebody pulls out a harmonica and starts playing with you. You may not even be in the right key. And the person leading the music has to figure out how to get them off the stage or accommodate them.
Some of these harmonicas are augmented, so you can have a more complex harmonica. And so people who are professional players of harmonica have a lot of facility. And can you say something about?
Yes, look for the name Howard Levy, Levy. He can take this simple little 10-hole instrument that I'm playing here and make it chromatic. That means he can get all 12 notes out of any scale on these harmonicas when the harmonica itself only has at most 8. And in some keys, in some parts of the harmonica, you've only got 6 of the notes there. He's so proficient at overdriving every hole that he can play this the same as you would play a piano playing a couple of notes at a time. Or if you ever, the harmonica you may be thinking of is called a chromatic harmonica, which is actually 2 harmonicas in the same chassis. And between the 2 of those harmonicas, you get all of the notes in a chromatic scale, all 12 notes. Again, Levy does that on just one plain old simple, and it's a very different sound. If people want to hear this man, you can hear him. I don't know he's ever recorded an entire album himself, but if you ever listen to Bela Fleck and the Flecktones and you hear a harmonica, that is Howard Levy playing. And he's just amazing. I've told people he will either drive you to start working on your harmonica and find more and more things like that you can do, or you'll just toss it over your shoulder and say, that's it. I can't do that. I can't sound anything like that. It's just not worth it anymore. But no, he's really, really spectacular because he does what's called overblows on the harmonica, which are supposed to be impossible the same way as bumblebees aren't supposed to be able to fly.
A lot of it is practice.
Yes, which I don't do nearly enough of. I say it more than I tell other people more than I actually practice that one.
So is Focus Roots still on today?
I have to tell you, I don't know. I thought it was just Friday and Saturday. Yeah. A lot of these festivals do extend over to have like
seminars and things like that.
Yeah, and gospel brunches on Sunday morning. I don't think that there was such a thing, and I didn't think to look that up before I came over here. So
okay, but we encourage that sort of thing to keep community together. It was interesting that this week. Figure 1, which is just around the corner from WEFT, it's on the other side on Walnut Street, was doing an event where the university is trying to encourage community interaction, and they were sort of targeted on the black community, which sometimes doesn't get the attention that it needs, and they have musicians and artists there that you can't believe. So that was an event on Saturday, I think, that brought people together. And they have a group that does theatricals. It's called the City Group, and they were a part of this. And I think you need to follow through with that because that will be a continuing event. And some of the electronics there, they're using quite a number of digital projectors, and so you can do a lot of things with digital images, and especially video images, and then you can add sound in too. So visit Figure 1. It's open, I think, most days of the week, and on the weekend too. So I don't have a schedule, but very helpful in trying to encourage the community to be more accessible. So, okay, I have a lot of things here. We usually cover quite a few of the things that we have done in the past week, mainly to try and encourage other people to do the same. And a lot of people do that. There's probably 20 or more different environmental groups, historic groups, geological groups, antique groups that are around town. They often overlap, but they don't always get together. So we encounter some of these groups and then try to have you realize that they're there and that you can belong to them and that you can actually lead. David's talking about harmonica. Some of these things like art drawing, people say they can't do it, but when you give them a pencil and some music and a little bit of bebop, it is amazing that they come up with things that they never dreamed that they could come up with. So we're encouraging you out there, and that's what WEFT is about, is to encourage people to get together. And that often means naming names and knowing who people are. And you might not recognize a person by name, but you certainly will recognize them by their facial features or what they do. So one of the things I did this week was to go to a memorial service for Susan Stone. Susan Stone was kind of a powerhouse around here. She came here with her husband, who was a law professor, and of note, Victor Stone. And she had family, 3 children, and was a homebody, but she was also League of Women Voters and a whole bunch of other things. So she was an activist, she was a friend, she was a naturalist, a landscape visionary. She had a lot to do with putting trees in and having Banner classified as a tree city because of that. She was a promoter of things at the state level. She was on the Electricity Commission. She was appointed by Governor Thompson, who was a Republican person, but she had ability. But after a while, she didn't survive because she was challenging some of the suppliers and their need to up the prices without telling the public how and when and why. So, but she was on the Park District, on the foundation for the library. She had a lot to do with not having Banner's post office stuck out there by Walmart at the edge of town, but to keep the post office in downtown Banner. She had a lot to do with Meadowbrook Park and Busey Woods and Anita Purvis Center, which is a fine natural history center. And so the family and friends had a lot to say about Susan's ability to move and shake things, to get together with groups, to have book clubs, to have a wine contest with the women. So they were the local winos, as they call themselves. But just these are the sorts of things that make for a community to survive. And her grandchildren had things to say about Grandma, and she unfortunately had Alzheimer's for a while, and that's always sad to see someone who's very active lose their ability to be so active. But at that time, memory, long-term memory, often kicks in. So she could go back to New York, where she was from in the first place, with associates that would be able to remind her of her background. So I thought that was very helpful. I had to say that Susan had a legacy associated with the 24 miles of railroad bed between Urbana and Danville, which will be the Kickapoo Trail. We initiated that, and I went to CCDC, which was formed by Susan Stone, the Champaign County Design and Conservation Foundation. And she thought that was a wonderful idea, and then so CCDC took over that, and eventually after 20 years, that is into action. There will be a 24.5-mile trail to Danville that will go into the Kickapoo State Park, and Susan Stone had a lot to do with pushing that. You could bet that if there was a community project, Susan would be there. Well, last week we ran a field trip to Allerton Park.
Could I toss in a remembrance also? Sorry, since we're right there. He didn't pass away this past week, but there was a remembrance celebration yesterday for Alex Martirano. He passed away a couple of months ago, within the last couple of months. And his mom, people may remember or may know Dorothy.
She's very prominent in the folk and roots.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and so yesterday was his remembrance celebration. And I just want to mention really quickly, he was very active in some local groups, like a group called Mother and then Motherless Pearls. And I just saw on Facebook today, I know on Facebook, Kristen Johns, who is very active in making videos of local musicians. And she has quite a few of Alex himself. And she also has videos of the folks who are there celebrating, remembering Alex. So if you go to Facebook, and I think these are public, anyone who wants to can simply go to Facebook and type in Champaign Underground Video. You'll get to everything that Kristen has put up there. And quite a few of them recently are in memory of Alex. So one other.
And I think he might have been into computerized music.
I don't know. I mainly know him from the band Mother from a long time ago. But yes, I know there are quite a few other folks people came in from out of town for this service.
From Cage being here a long time ago, and other people like that.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. He was a bass player. So.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
These are events that more commonly are coming sometime after people pass. I was reading Ernie Adams passed some time ago, and they had an event at the Red Herring for Ernie, and Ernie had quite a family of children, and was a landscaper, but he was also wrote poetry, read literature, and was quite a character around town. He was sometimes like the Pied Piper with a piano accordion and children behind him. So Ernie has passed on, but he will be remembered for quite some time. Okay, well, we did go to Allerton, and we didn't do too much work. We just looked at resources because we have people who are willing to help to do things, and the important thing is to have people know what the resources are. And I'll talk a little later about going to the DeLand Weldon. We have trails that run out from Seymour to Clinton, and we would. It's important that people know these resources. Part of it is a matter of computerization. We need to have good web pages. We need to have good newsletters. And this week I was very pleased. I had a problem with emails. They kept dropping off. And so I called Google Help. And wow, it cost me $50, but it was worth it because the person that got on was really knowledgeable about what we were doing and what we were trying to do, and rather complimentary about us trying to do things with television and YouTube and radio. And but he straightened me out a lot. I tend to write letters and not send them because it's more or less my thoughts, and I'm not always sure that the diplomacy is there. So I have been tending to store them in drafts, and the guy I was talking to said, "You don't do that. You only need about 10 drafts stuck there. If you want to store your thoughts, put them on your hard drive." And he took off some of the things that we had on our computer, whether it would be a Mac or a PC, that let us. He realized that we would never use some of these programs that we had on, so that was very helpful. And David comes over and helps me with, like, when we photograph this program, we take the chip and then put it up with visuals. I don't know whether I have very many visuals this week, but certainly if we have a visual that helps, we'll put it in if it's smooth. So we need people who have that sort of skill, and more, if you're looking at labor doing things, the people who are going to get jobs are people who are going to be able to handle computers. I mean, I go to elevators, and it's a computer that is working the distributor at the top of the elevator. Not in all cases. Some of it's mechanical, but it's more and more. Every job is being aided by computers, and so we need to foster those people who can do that. And some of them are very young people who really know, and they're artistic about this too. They can recognize they don't have to think because they know, and then they can add their creative element to the situation, whether that be someone working with a roadside ditch, or whether it's someone and the roadside ditch guy might be using a laser beam or hydraulic equipment on a bulldozer that's hydraulic and electronic and tremendously powerful. Okay, we were looking at resources, so we probably 2 hours and 2.5 hours, and came back. And we'll do that sort of thing periodically, just to let people know what resources we have. I went to Rantoul. At Rantoul, we had 50 iHelp student helpers on a Saturday a while ago, but they left a lot of trash and teasel clippings in bags on the corridor next to our Pope Prairie. And it was worrying me, because if you leave trash on that site, then you encourage other people to do trash. So I picked up all the bagged trash. So for those people that were out there helping as stewards, and David was one, I want to let you know that we removed that trash. I didn't have the facility to move mattresses and couches and things that are very helpful. Carpets that, when they get wet, are so heavy you can't lift them. We need a front-end loader for that sort of thing. And in the long run, we have to think big enough to not only have a warehouse, but to have a tandem truck, to have a backhoe, to be able to facilitate thinking about extending our corridors and putting in a nature trail, perhaps from Monticello to Cisco, and perhaps a more broad bicycle trail through Lodge, from Sadie Rest to Lodge to DeLand to Weldon to Lane to Clinton. That's 23 miles. So yesterday I was at Weldon School, where there was a rededication, and I'll talk about that a little later. But we have to introduce people to our resources. And also, we have to say something about what we've done. Many of the things that we've done over the years have been kind of silent. we instigate things and move them along. And often we don't continue ourselves, but because it's not very friendly for initiators to peer over the shoulder of the people that are working and doing the things that you would like to see happen, because they have their own mind, their own agenda, and you hope it will be something like what you want, but you don't want to control that. So we've stayed fairly silent behind the scenes, but groups like the Grand Prairie Friends, we initiated, and they've done very, very well, and I have to applaud their involvement in the landscape, but we should be able to get some credential for initiating. The trail to Danville would not be there if we hadn't initiated it. The interim trail use agreement with the federal government and the state and local agencies. So somehow we have to list that sort of thing. If we go to a more sophisticated request for funds, people have to know what you've done and why you want to do what you're doing, what resources you have, and how you can bring people together. And many cases we have brought people together and been successful at doing that. But we continue. And part of appearing at a DeLand Weldon school is to say, okay, you folk have a trail out there. It's only half a section away from you. That's like half a mile away from you. And can we do something to develop this in a gentle way? It's not costly, but we'll talk about that a little later. I was at Rantoul, removed the trash, and there's an old road there that David knows well because he had a bunch of the I-Help students remove trees. I did drag them across the other side of the road because where they put the trees was on a prairie, and so I moved them across to the south side of the road. Well, probably should say the east side of the road, where the prairie is not quite so healthy. And, I also visited with Ian Wang, and Ian Wang, for those of you who don't know, is Asian, and he owned quite a bit of territory in the old Air Force Base, and I had read the Rantoul newspaper, and there was an article about Ian being interested in establishing a cultural exchange center, and it had a picture of a number of professor-level people who've come from China. Ian himself has been in China for a month, and he often visits there. And these people were artists, anthropologists, archaeologists, and a range of people who might find a site in Rantoul where they could work and exchange. And my immediate thought was, what better than to have a trail that would go all the way from Rantoul to Paxton, and to have people of American background and foreign background working together and doing something. Often doing something tells you so much more about each other and your landscape and your ecology and your biology and your geology and stuff like that than if you try to sit someone in a seminar and tell them that. The seminars are handy, but the hands-on situation is very helpful, because when somebody finds a plant that they don't know, what is that, then next sentence they've got to tell somebody else what that is. And when you're taking if you're a steward and you take a field trip with 10 kids and they keep asking you, what is that? Then very shortly you get to know what that is. And so I was talking to Ian. He owns a retirement village at Rantoul, and he has an art display along the corridors which is very compatible with people who are retirees, who are in a nursing home. All needlework, and I don't know whether that's permanent, but Ian has been collecting art for a long, long time, and he has the resources that he can use, and it's very kind to older people to have that sort of resource and those artworks that they can look at and enjoy. He tried to put in a prairie outside the building, but that got sort of axed because Rantoul has a mowing syndrome, and prairies don't really fit in. Whether it's along the roadside or a planted prairie, it's very, very hard to convince the village not to mow certain parts of their village. It depends entirely on the administration. Years ago, we had an administration that was very pro-prairie, and so we had areas cordoned off so that the prairie would grow. Now that is all outside the Air Force Base, for instance, is good prairie, but it gets mown like a billiard table. And so I talked to Ian, went to lunch with him at his retirement village, and later I was at the Figure One Theatre, which he reminded me was there for Saturday night, and he is on, I think he might be chair of the Spurlock Museum advisory board. He is knowledgeable of the history of art. Often he said something at that Figure One event that interested me. He was explaining that, I think it was Gregory, one of the early presidents, wanted desperately to have an art facility because most of the people that came here were digging in. They were going to have to drain the ground and work the soil. But really they needed to, at some stage, get a feeling for art and things beyond their hoe that they were hoeing with. And the Board of Trustees didn't approve Gregor's request, but he took out of his own pocket and went to Europe and bought something like $3,000 worth of artwork, which in those days was a lot more valuable than $3,000 today. So Ian is knowledgeable, and we should watch him and help him to do his thing, and remind him that there are these other resources like an old concrete road going to Paxton, parallel to Route 45. It goes up over the moraine, so you have this chance to talk about the geology of the going up the hill and over on the backside of the moraine and past the elevators and find really wonderful prairie along the railroad line. And he knows it. He sometimes grabs a camera and comes with me to the prairie to take photographs of a display of laelatrus or purple coneflower. But he does realize that it costs to put in a trail. It doesn't only cost to put it in to buy, or in this case, it is not as expensive, I suspect, because it's Department of Transportation territory. So we figure that it could be fairly low cost. During the period when it was retired, the culverts were taken out because sometimes it's thought that they will be a liability. Someone will fall off the culvert and there'll be a liability problem. So the culverts are taken out. There might be 10 culverts between Rantoul and Paxton. But working that corridor, I think, would be almost, you could take people off the highway coming back from Chicago, take them off the highway at Kankakee and come down 45 and almost institute a national park for tallgrass prairie without altering a thing, without making a 1,000-acre park. You just use the roadside that's there, the railroads, remnant prairies, and you stop people at certain places and you give them a little kiosk so they can read and find out what's going on and find out about the farming and the like. So that, to me, was valuable to not only talk to Ian, but to listen to him say something at the Figure One group of people that was brought together by Sam Smith out of Granite Museum. And there'll be more of those sorts of things because I think that's what Sam Smith's role in life is in the university, is to promote interaction with the community. And this is an art gallery. Figure One is an art gallery that's on Walnut Street, and that's its purpose. So go there and see the artwork and talk to the people who are in charge, and they might make you some contacts that you haven't expected. Something along the same lines, I've been chaperoning Iris. Iris is from southern China, and she's here doing a journalism degree. And she's almost to the point of going to grad school. And one of her assignments is to look at elevators and ask questions about how grain is being shipped. She's very aware, and her professor is probably aware, that there is a problem at the moment of how you ship grain. So can you talk to a farmer? Can you talk to an elevator operator? Can you talk to a super elevator like the Andersons? Well, we've been going to places, and it's interesting for me too because I've been interested in the preservation of elevators and the interpretation of elevators. And one of the things we do when we go to Allerton Park is to look at an elevator, an old wooden elevator. And so if people are willing to look at such an elevator and think about a grant to maintain such an elevator, actually activate such an elevator so that it could be demonstrated as to how grain would be moved or stored in such an elevator, then we're looking at those sorts of people who might be able to write that sort of grant but in the first place know what the building is. What is the structure? Where did the wood come from? How do you get to the top of it? How do you take grain out of such an elevator? If you're going to take a truck into an elevator, then the grain that's falling into the truck has to be higher than the truck. Or you have to have a leg which takes the grain up. And so we've been to Full's elevator, and Full's has this problem, same problem as everyone else. They don't have enough elevator space to be able to take wet grain that is being dried from, say, 25% down to 15%, or you've got corn and soybeans. So very quickly, your key elevators, whether they're concrete or wooden ones are out of date these days. The concrete ones are much more efficient. There are trucks going in from farmland to dump grain that might be almost dry. It might be 16%. That's almost down to about 15%, which is what the usual level of grain moisture is, if you want to store it without it molding or rotting and things like that. So Iris was able to see and take video of grain coming in, and then the next contract truck that came in will go to Sydney, perhaps. It'll be loaded from the top, so the elevator is taking grain from the elevator to Sydney, which is probably 10 miles away, and there it is loaded into trucks where there's a siding that is 75 trucks long, so you can almost get a unit car train, which is about 100 truckloads. So you only have to add, say, another 25 cars from another elevator. So grain is going in and grain is going out. And are these farmers? Mostly not. These are contractors who are bringing grain from the field and loading it out, and then the same contractor will take a load of dried grain to Sydney and to the railroad, and the hope is that you'll have enough railroad cars to be able to handle that amount of grain. And that's the big problem. There haven't been enough railroad cars. There are sometimes not enough engines to move the trains. And if you're near to the Mississippi or the Illinois River, it's a matter of getting barges that can take the grain south or north. So it's at Fulls. Gordon Mueller was talked to me and explained a lot of the sorts of things that I wasn't quite sure about. And I have spent quite a bit of time with elevators and climbed up and through the gear head, which is where you usually have something downstairs that will allow you to move the grain from bin to bin. There might be a small grain elevator with only 6 bins. There might be a bigger grain elevator with 12, 24. But you have to be able to move your distributor so that the grain will fall into the appropriate bin. At Bonneville, Iris met up with Mike Bush. Mike Bush was on the city council for quite some time and quite outspoken, so I thought that might be a contact, and certainly Mike gave Iris a good introduction to elevatoring. It is sort of his passion, and he cares about it, and he's been doing it for 34 years. So he knows what he's doing. So she could see that the grain was sampled. The grain is then tested for its moisture content, and there are schedules where you get paid according to the amount of moisture, paid according to the different fields. So the trucks that come in generate a lot of information that is helpful to the farmer, helpful to the economist, and it sort of creates this overall debate that you hear on radio over and over again, where people are discussing the ups and downs of a price of a bushel of grain. If it's corn, it's something like 56 pounds of corn in a bushel. If it's soybeans, it's less than that, but more like 50, I think. But we talk in bushels, and it's not necessarily by decimal measurements. It's usually, although if you were dealing with Europe, you'd probably be dealing with decimal currency, decimal measurements. So while Iris was talking to Mike Bush, I was talking to Mike Prentice, and these are the people who have to crawl up on top of the elevators and release the grain, and this is an experience. So, but Mike has been quite interested in the prairie and the trail that goes past these elevators. And so we had an interesting chat, and he lives at Mahomet, and Mahomet has got trails with the forest preserve and the like. And so this sort of interaction is what we like to do ourselves and encourage others to do. When we left the Bonneville area, we went past Anderson's, and you can't believe there is a mountain of corn on the ground outside Anderson elevators that just won't fit in the elevators at the present time. Anderson's is associated with the Cargill family, and they do super elevators. To some extent, that closes down the little elevators because they have a railhead that you could put several trains on, and you can load out quite a lot of grain. And the small elevators are still needed. And in fact, there's a rising elevator very near to the Cargill elevator. But the small elevators send their grain to the larger elevators, and then it ships out. Or Bonneville was sending their grain to ADM in Decatur, and that would be by road. That has some problems because the grain that's shipped by rail is going to cost you less for transport than if you send it to ADM or Tate and Lyle in Decatur. Yes, we've got a few minutes now. So I went off to the DeLand Weldon, and DeLand and Weldon are two towns, usually about 5 miles apart, because these were you have to go back to the Jeffersonian Platte. People didn't know where their territory was when they had lined up to buy territory in Europe and other places. The stone which represented your corner might be gone. The tree has died. So Jefferson got smart and he put a grid across the country that was north, south, east, and west, and in little squares. Each square is a mile by a mile. And it doesn't work when you're near a river, so there are some wiggle-woggle roads that are included. It doesn't deal with conservation very well because the squares don't allow good conservation easements that will channel the water. So you might have a hill and you want a terrace, and it goes through 3 farms. So, and the farms are square, whereas if you were working on a contour, you'd need the contour. So the Jeffersonian Platte is not perfect. But every 5 miles, there was an elevator, and it's usually 5 miles because that would be at most about 8 miles for a horse to draw your wagon. And so they're fairly common. They had a siding. You're not allowed to load your grain on the main line, so you have to have a siding. But the sidings were small. You could probably only have 10 cars. And that's not what a modern-day train like Canadian National or Norfolk Southern, they would like to pick up 100 cars or 25 here and 25 there, but not a little group like 10. So if you have to have an engine come and push you 10 cars, then you're not going to be service quite so readily as someone who has, like Sydney's, 75 cars can be picked up at once. So DeLand and Weldon are 5 miles apart, and they had 2 high schools, 2 grade schools. Each town had its own grade school, and remarkably, they had their own newspapers. Each town had its own newspaper. About 60% of the people at those places were working at the elevator or on the railroad. And the elevators were old, and they were clad with iron so they didn't get caught on fire by sparks from steam engines. But gradually those towns have grown, and at the present time they're not large. And so there's a need for consolidation of the schools. So I went to DeLand Weldon because DeLand Weldon School, high school and grade school, are on the divide between DeLand and Weldon, halfway between each. And it's a high school out in the middle of nowhere, which is not uncommon for groups that get together and share their educational facilities. I went to the rededication of this school. School has been there for 50 years, and when it was put up, it cost like $450,000, and today that wouldn't be possible. This school has been a one-story school. It was added, the grade schools were added on. About 10 years later, the original was about 1958 or 60, and they've worked efficiently since then, but the boilers get old, the heaters get old, the windows wear out, and so they have put a lot of money into redoing the DeLand Weldon School, and there's a lot of spirit there. So I went to the dedication, and I got to know the people there, and that's important to us because our railroad bed goes right past this school. It's a section away. And it would be very nice to have some relationship between the school and the school children using the biology in the prairie that's on the corridor. The farmers nearby are quite willing. There's a little invasion of the territory for corn and soybeans, but people like to walk, like to sometimes ride their motorcycles along those corridors. So I talked to the principal, and he comes from Mahomet. And Mahomet has a whole bunch of these trails, so I think we have some relationships there. I talked to the contractor, and the contractor is also used to working. He comes from the Granite City area, the Grafton, Pierre Marquette, that sort of area, and he's very familiar with the Katy Trail that we've been talking about, and the bottomlands that come across to Illinois and go up the Illinois River past the Pierre Marquette State Park and past Grafton and those other places that were often where the captains of paddle wheelers used to live. Chris Carl, who's just getting his master's degree in landscape architecture here, has gone back down there where the family is, and he's working at Granite City with some of the steel territory, like 700 acres, has been retired, and so they're thinking to do a sculpture garden there. So we talked about these sorts of things. Then we have a formal meeting, and that to me is intriguing too. I don't get to go to these sorts of things. So I'll just run through some of the people some of the involvement of rededication.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, wow, okay. So scouts with colors, an anthem with a past person, a school board chairman, the state representative, the principal, the school board vice chair, the superintendent, the school board members, and the contractor, the librarian, the alumni association, and bless me too, a student. And that was a rather wonderful presentation, and I got to talk to these people, and I'm sure I'll be talking to them again. The school did, over the period of 50 years, catch on fire twice, mainly because the maintenance of heaters and the like. But they went into they go into the future now with caring for students that are in the farmland and roundabout. So I think that's probably where we're at the moment. If people feel like giving me a call, I can tell them more about these things, and if people are interested, we can also go out into the boondocks and pick seed and inspect resources. And thank you for listening. This is Dave Monk, your Prairie Monk, WEFT Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial.